Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pints and Politics. I'm Drew. This is Mike, and we kind of got a special one for you today. As of recording, we are at the Capitol in St. Paul, and this is day one of session. I drove down here. Mike's in session because he is a state legislator, not a politician,
Not a politician.
but he is a lawmaker down here in St. Paul. And oh, I'm kind of excited. I drove down here and I've actually never been to the Capitol before. It's beautiful, beautiful building. The artwork and just some of the architecture, even. And I guess I might be a little weird like that, but
No, it is amazing, and the building is super cool.
yeah.
And when we walked over today, we paused
Hmm.
before we went up there and just looked at everything. The horses, the chariot up on the top, the massive building, the dome, everything. A senior legislator, and we shared this earlier, he said, look at that building, and this is where you get to work. Not everybody gets this opportunity. It's a huge responsibility. Um, but always remember the position you're in is kind of what he said, because we hold we hold a lot of respect for the office. I always joke that I'm not a politician because I just don't feel like one. But the offices or the office itself and the responsibility that it's entailed, it's it's something else. It's kind of humbling that people, gave me their vote of confidence to send me down here to represent them. I am truly blessed. And as much as I um, dread sometimes the sessions or what's going on, because, with the trifecta, it's really hard to legislate when everything is one sided.
It really
Um,
is.
the position to me is just amazing. I love the people I work for. I really do. So, and you're
Yeah,
down here, and I always said that
yeah.
anytime any folks from district are down here, this is an open door policy. So if you're ever down at the Capitol, stop in and say hi, or find me if I'm not at my office. If I'm down on the floor, I will come out and visit. To see people from home, that's like the highlight of this job. If they made it all the way down here to see me, I'm gonna make time to see them. So,
That's
your
great.
first day, your first
Yeah,
impression.
first day. It was quick. It was
Well, we went
quick.
to an ERA rally, didn't we?
Well, okay, we didn't really. It was they held it in the rotunda, which is like the middle section, and I was kind of there, and I always show up early. I don't know, it's a bad habit, I guess, or a good habit. I show up early and they're setting up and there's people there. I'm like, okay, so what's this? And I'm not familiar with all these political organizations. I'm relatively new, I suppose would be a good term.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh yeah, equal rights for everyone. I was like, okay, what does that mean exactly? Like, what rights do you have or do you not have that you want? And I didn't get any straight answers. I heard a bunch of buzzwords like reproductive rights, um, just equal justice, like trans rights, gender equality. I'm just like, okay, so specifically, and I'm like, okay, can you elaborate on that? And the lady's like, no, I gotta go. It's like, oh, okay, bye. And
I'm pretty sure that everybody's rights are already protected, you
mhm,
know? Everybody has equal opportunity or equal rights. Um, but when we make legislation that makes some people more equal than others, I mean that
yeah,
should raise some eyebrows.
yeah, no, it's curious because like I'm asking for specifics, and like I actually talked to about three or four people, and three of them were like, yeah, I'm just kind of here with somebody else. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll go ask this person then. And once I finally got someone who knew something, is kind of buzzwords, and then I gotta leave.
Well, I kind of joked about being at the ERA rally. It really
Yeah.
wasn't the purpose of us being there. We came into the Capitol, that was going on. Just pointed out, we stood there and watched for a little bit, but
Mhm.
talked to some homeschool groups that showed up.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was really cool. It's nice to see them and talk with them. But the history of the building, and you brought that up,
Oh yeah.
the architecture, and I love, up on the second floor where all the sayings, different quotes from, some of the best minds through history,
Yeah.
written on those Capitol walls. And to think that I get to work there. And
Yeah.
it's funny to sit down sometimes and just read there and ponder what they say.
Mm.
And you have to wonder if anybody else is looking at those quotes, because when it comes to legislation, it sure doesn't seem like they're reflecting on them at
And
all.
I don't think so either. I don't think they're really looking up. No, I think they're just looking either forward or kind of at their shoes. Because I mean that both physically and metaphorically. Because physically, most if they're not on their phone, they're just kind of like trying to keep their head down so they can get from place to place. And not everyone wants to chit chat.
Hmm.
Is what it feels like. I don't. Again, this is day one, so maybe people are just like, I just want to show up, get done, get day one over with, and then work on stuff when there's not so many prying eyes.
Well, we started off here in the state office building first, and this is
Hmm.
lovingly being called the Palace for Politicians.
Yep, the state office building. Apparently, it's also called the SOB,
The
which
SOB.
I find funny.
And to the north, I think that's the north side of the SOB was this nice park. That's all ripped up. Now all the trees and stuff are gone for the $750 million of taxpayers' money that's going to get spent on this building and expansion. And that's really frustrating to me. We come from an
Yeah.
area that we're fiscally responsible for the taxpayers' dollars,
Hmm.
and our county commissioners and our cities and so many other people just very tight on their budgets. And then we come to the Capitol here, and we see the waste.
Yeah.
It is so frustrating.
Yeah, the thing that gets me a little bit, and maybe this is more the hippie in me, but we're tearing up all the grass and the plants and the trees for concrete and buildings. And aren't we concerned about climate change in Minnesota? Or do
Well,
we pretend to be?
there again, look at the building we're in.
Yeah, it's all concrete.
Well, this is it's granite, I believe.
Oh, is it?
That's granite on the outside. I think this was built in the 30s or 40s.
Oh my.
It's kind of an Art Deco style. So this is getting remodeled, refurbished.
Mhm.
But any government project that I see has never really met its budget. And the way this is written up to, it's an open drawing a blank on the term, but basically it could go over that 730 or $750 million.
That means it will.
That means it will, exactly. If anything can be learned from past experience, it's that government never meets its budget, and it will definitely go over. So I expect this thing by the time it's done to be close to $1 billion.
And actually, that's a great segue into what I kind of want to talk about next, because I was fortunate enough to sit into a tax committee hearing that you were part of, and they were talking about a discrepancy from last year
Sure.
was on the docket, and this tax discrepancy is like $350 million, right?
Yeah, I think that was the number that was discussed today.
Yeah.
Um, and instead of fixing the problem, what did they decide to do?
Nothing.
Nothing. Kick that can down the road because it's already baked into the budget.
Yeah.
So therefore, if it's changed now, which it needs to be, and it was also promised in a letter that was written by the chair
Mhm.
that it was going to be fixed as soon as possible, um, we're going to kick that can down the road, which means especially small businesses who have already done their taxes um, are going to have to redo their taxes at some point in time when this adjustment is made.
Mhm.
And that's going to cost them more time, more effort, more struggle, when it could be done now
Yeah.
and would save them a lot. But because it would not necessarily help the budget, if they pass that now, that $350 million is going to have to come out of a different area to cover the deficit. So they don't want to do that now so that they can spend the other $350 million
Mhm.
and find a different revenue stream, or maybe raise another tax so that it can come up for the shortfall. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It should have been fixed.
And the thing that is weird to me, because this was an issue from last session, correct?
Yes.
So why didn't we either call a special session or fix it last session?
Well,
And
and
that's the
that's where
thing.
that letter came.
Yeah.
That letter was stated that it would be fixed as soon as possible. Well, this is the first day of session. It's as soon as possible, and yet no
And
desire to fix it.
and there have even been committee hearings before session started too, am I correct?
There was some, and I don't know how that is even legal.
I don't either.
I'm not sure. Session starts on a certain date. It was voted on at the end of last session. So
Yeah.
how can you start the session early with committee meetings and so forth? That doesn't seem right. Where's the transparency?
Oh, it seems disingenuous would be the term, the big term I would use today.
And when they have the control of the House, the Senate, and the governorship,
Hmm.
why do you need to start session early? You guys control everything.
Yeah.
So why do that unless you're trying to, unless it seems, like underhanded?
It seems underhanded, like you just want to kind of hide what you're doing, put
Mhm.
up a curtain.
Correct.
But yeah, it's just like just a couple of interesting things from day one, and there was a floor vote today, right? Was it a full vote or?
Well, there was a urgency for the SROs,
Yep, and
trying to get something moved through for that because there's so many school districts out there that are still in kind of a limbo.
yep, and SRO is a school resource officer for those
Right.
who don't know
Apologize. You get pretty used to
the
the
lingo.
lingo and you forget to spell it out. But
Yeah.
yeah, the SROs is the school resource officers. And last year we saw that legislation come up, a lot of confusion in it. There was a lot of schools that said we cannot keep our school resource officers because of the language in the bill would actually open them up for lawsuits.
Oh, is that what that was?
That's basically what it is.
Okay.
And then on the discussion on the floor today, one of the things that was brought up is, the school resource officers could stop a student if they were going to destroy property, but
Mhm.
teachers necessarily can't. So what was brought up in one of the discussions, or in one of the reps brought it up, so a student could be setting fire to the building. A teacher can't stop them. Only an SRO could. So there's the language of the law that
Yeah.
causes problems. And I was thinking about this on the floor. That's where that local autonomy comes in. If a school wants to have a school resource officer, maybe they want to have something else, but why is it that dictated and mandated from the metro?
Yeah. Because I'm starting to think that should be a school board issue, right?
That's exactly what I think. That local autonomy. If a local school wants to have a school resource officer, if they want to have something else, so be it.
Yeah.
Let them decide what they want.
Yeah. And plus, the school board would hypothetically they would know best for what's going on in their local community, right?
I would think so. Why would we want 160 tyrants down in St. Paul telling everybody how to live when you should be
Mhm.
responsible to the people in your own
Or
backyard?
even if they just delegate to the Department of Education, like how often do you expect the like anyone who's going to be pushing for this stuff to visit schools in your district?
Well, even for the Department of Education to regulate that, I don't think
Yeah.
that's right. I believe that should be up to school districts. If they want to have a school resource officer or a conflict manager officer or
Mhm.
whatever the term you want to put, or however they want to do it, maybe a school district doesn't have issues with it and doesn't want to have school resource officers. Maybe they already have local police, sheriff, or whoever comes
Yeah.
in for a regular visit. Maybe they don't need the contract, but why are we going to regulate this at the state level when this is really, like you said, a
S-
local issue?
At most, it'd be a county issue. At most. But I don't think the county would need to get involved. It's again, like the town, the school board, they can handle it.
I look at some of the school districts out in our area, they can cover, two, three different counties with some
Hmm.
of them.
Okay.
So your
Yeah,
school
that's
district,
fair. That's fair.
that can cover a pretty broad area.
Yeah.
So it should be up to that school district, I think.
Yeah. That makes. Yeah, that adds. Now that I think about it, you're right on that one. But again, like they know what they need. They should be able to take care of it.
Right. But that's what happens when government gets so big, then it has to dictate every aspect of your life. That's a dangerous precedence to be in. And then it really breeds the inefficiencies because that
Yeah.
law, which is meant to cover all of these people or all the
Yep.
state, is not effective in some areas and it's detrimental and can be detrimental in others.
Yep.
Um,
And
and that's a
then
problem.
when you get so many layers of bureaucracy that get involved too, you lose quality of decision making and of money and of resources. And so it just makes it harder and a lot more expensive in order to do things.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen a lot of problems with schools, behavioral issues and stuff.
Hmm.
And it's not just down in the metro.
No,
And some of
I,
that is in greater Minnesota. We see less instances of it per capita, I believe.
yeah,
Um,
I think some of that has to do with the prevalence of like internet use and like social media. But
I
that's my opinion.
I think there's a lot of factors that go into that, behavioral issues, and it's harder for the teachers. I would definitely,
Oh yeah.
talking to a lot of teachers and superintendents and principals, The behavioral issues that they see now is much worse than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so there are more challenges and more things they have to deal with. But there again, if the school district and the school board says they want more local control, and maybe that's work with the local sheriff or city cops,
Yeah.
I really believe that's up for them to decide. And the law coming from the state and the mandates of the state are just ineffective.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like the state's not going to know because they're not going up to the districts in Greater Minnesota. For the most part, I don't think they really know how we live up in the counties that we live. I think most of these guys, they stay in the metro area and all they know is the metro area, where they have access to everything they could ever want. Just like I'll just drive down the road instead of 30 miles.
Well, and there's so much difference that you can have, even in a district like mine.
Hmm.
Take one school in the southern part of my district, and the demographics are, a night and day difference to the next school district that's only 8 miles up the road
Yep.
because of just simple numbers, you know. Um, so does the one school need a school resource officer and the other one doesn't?
Yeah,
Potentially.
very potential, yeah.
And if there's 13, 15 school districts in like my district, um, every single one of them is different. Why not let them decide what works
Yeah.
for them?
Yeah, like they'd be the best ones to know.
I agree. But that's the one size fits all of government. That does not work.
No, it doesn't really work. It doesn't necessarily work for football jerseys, and it doesn't necessarily work for government legislation.
That's very true. One size fits all is such a lie.
Yeah.
I've tried on so many hats that say one size fits all. That's not true.
Oh yeah, no, everyone's got a different head on their shoulders. Everyone thinks different. That's, I guess that's one of the things that maybe we need to push a little bit is everyone thinks different, even you and me.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we have pretty good discussions.
Yeah.
Sometimes afterwards we get pretty heated.
I,
Yeah.
I,
I won't show the bruises. He punches me.
hey, I no, I'm a wrestler. It's armbar all the way up.
No, but those discussions is really what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, it's how
Figure
you
out
build an idea.
Right.
Yeah.
There's times when we've had pretty good discussions on different things, and then you come back later and go, never really thought about that.
Yeah.
And if you listen and learn, that's huge.
Mhm.
So what else did we learn today with your time
Today,
girls?
did I learn? I guess it was just quick. It was day one. It's supposed to be a bonding year, I guess, is what you've told
Okay.
me. I don't know what bonding, I'm still learning what a bonding year is.
So bonding and infrastructure spending,
Hmm.
basically that's money that's going to get long-term spending on projects like it's supposed to be roads, bridges,
Okay.
water
Infrastructure.
treatment, stuff like that. But what we see more and more is there's the wants versus needs that end up in bonding.
Okay.
So it's not just roads and bridges that gets fixed, but that's constantly what you hear when it comes to bonding.
Mhm.
And there's things like a rugby field in the North Metro or parks and trails. That is not
That's
necessarily,
bonding?
that ends up being going into bonding.
Mhm.
This year as well, with the governor's plan, um, maintenance and upkeep on state buildings is a big part of the bonding. That's not a bonding issue. That is actually maintenance and upkeep. That should be in your operating cost for these different departments and stuff. But what's going to happen is if they can take the money out of bonding so that they don't have to take it out of their operating expense, then that's more money that they can spend on other projects. So it's basically a shuffling.
Of
It's
money.
creative accounting in order to open up money for something else.
And I'm gonna assume that this something else isn't in the books yet.
Oh, I
It's
don't
not
know.
planned out.
I haven't gone through all the bonding projects.
Yeah, because isn't that
Um,
like a 10,000 page deal?
I don't know how many pages. I know that there's a lot of money that's going to get pushed again this year. And when we're already looking at a structural deficit, as they call it, that means they're going in the hole. So we were talking about bonding, right? And this has been a thorn in my side,
Yeah.
so to speak. In our area, we don't get a lot of bonding.
No, what was it? What'd you say? $4 million
4 billion,
then?
something like that. There's other districts that are getting 20, 30, 40 million, depending upon where they're located and so forth.
How close the election is.
Exactly. If it's contentious races, you tend to see more bonding money there. So we're not really dealing with infrastructure. We're dealing with power and control, buying votes, which is really frustrating for me. Um, so wants versus needs is what we are talking about a little
Yep.
bit.
Yeah, you're talking about parks getting built and money getting shuffled around.
Well, green energy.
Green energy.
You'll see project forward green energy in
Oh,
the bonding
yep.
bills.
Yeah.
Now, if those projects are self-sufficient, which most of them should be, then we shouldn't be spending bonding money on them. You know, if somebody's going to be making a profit off of it, I don't think we should be spending bonding money on green energy.
Yeah.
So there your taxpayer dollars are again being spent on things that most people probably don't realize and probably wouldn't be happy with. You know, if you've got a municipality that ends up with a city center or something to that effect in a small town, but they can't even um, pay for the maintenance and upkeep after that, well, that's actually going to hurt that area in the long run because they're going to have staff and people
Yeah.
to keep up the building and so forth, and that adds to the budget
Mhm.
of a city or a county or whatever it is, and probably can't afford it themselves. You know, so the wants versus needs in bonding is something that should be talked about, and in this year especially. Um, last year I should say $19.5 billion.
Mhm.
That surplus is gone. It's all spent. The $10 billion in revenue raisers, as they're called, which is basically tax increases. The size of government grew 38%.
Mhm.
And now you're coming back and saying we need money to upkeep state buildings. You know, as a caucus or as one side versus the other here, we should really look at this and say taxpayers are struggling.
Yeah, they are.
Why are we looking at more bonding for projects that aren't necessarily roads and bridges? Because if it was just roads and bridges, I don't think this would be much of an issue.
Yeah.
But
Well, there's a gas
we,
tax coming up too, isn't there?
well, then there's also the clean, what is it called? I don't remember, but that's going to be about another 30 some cents.
Yeah.
That is not going to go to roads and bridges.
Yeah, so it's like, why are we like, and this goes back to us talking about government spending again. It's just like we're spending so much, we're pulling that money in from the taxpayers, and then on top of that, we're decreasing incentive to even be here.
Well, and then the other thing is last session, there was so many bills, free food for all, free lunches for kids.
Students.
No, I understand that. And I understand the premise behind it. But think about it this way, if taxpayers are not able to financially buy their kids lunch, but now your government is going to increase your taxes to pay for projects like maintenance on state buildings. Excuse me.
Well, how are you going to feed your kids lunch when it's not school?
Well, that's a good question. And if you're struggling to pay your bills now and you can't afford the food, more tax burden on the taxpayers does not help.
No.
So we're not helping out. We're not dealing with the base problem here. You know, there's these band-aid issues. We're going to make free lunch for all schools or for all kids. Why don't we let people keep more of their money so that they don't have to have a free lunch? They can buy their own lunch.
Yeah.
You know, the
And then they can
incentive
buy the lunch that is best.
that they choose that they want. Exactly. You know, I hear more and more complaints from schools and parents that say the lunches that are provided are not satisfactory. There are not enough calories for some of the kids, especially the ones that are playing in sports.
Yeah.
So it's more and more problems. There again, this is one size fits all of government that doesn't work.
Yeah, I remember like 5, 6, 7 years ago. Crap, how old am I? This back. It's been a
You're too young to not remember how
I'm
old.
too young to, yeah. But back in my day, or right when I got out of high school, what was it? Obama was still president, and Michelle had this thing called Let's Move Active Schools, where she was working on
Yes.
school lunches. And I remember, like at the time, thinking like, well, this is good. We want healthier stuff. And then I end up talking to people who actually experienced that, They said the school lunches were awful, just terrible, crappy food, tastes like crap,
Well, it's
like not
institutional
cheap.
food. Yeah.
Yeah, all subsidized with more of the unhealthy things. We get all your preservatives, not necessarily promoting healthier bodies
And I've always wondered why we couldn't on a more local level. We have farms, we have dairies, we
all over
have
the place.
right.
Yeah.
Why can't we locally source more of the meat products? I mean, why couldn't we locally source the milk? Why can't we locally source the cheeses? I mean,
Well,
there's
the issue with milks is that there's like I think in Minnesota you got maybe two creameries down here in the cities, and then you got the next closest one that I'm familiar with that's big enough to do this school would be like Cask or Kemp's up in Fargo. So you got Land O'Lakes, or I guess it's Prairie Farms here now in
but if you promoted more locally sourced
hmm.
stuff,
Oh yeah, then you get all the local biomes. You're getting into a topic that I get excited about when we're talking about cows eating grass.
well, local micro
But
versus
it's yeah, and well, the thing is like if you do something like maple trees, you're gonna have different nutrients in the maple trees you tap, like in the middle of the state versus in the south part of the state. You have different soil contents that get in there, and it affects you differently. Like Parmesan cheese is so special because the cows in the Parma region of Italy, they get a certain bacteria from the region that they live in. So if you were to do Parmesan cheese here in Minnesota, it would taste completely different, even if you use the same milk and everything. Well,
hmm,
no, not the same milk, but if you take cows from Italy, bring them to Minnesota, and you take the two and you do cheese in one area and the other, they're going to taste different because of that gut bile.
that's interesting. I knew honeys
Honeys do
were
that too. It's the
honeys are
same
huge.
concept.
So that can have really good effect on respiratory issues and so
Hmm.
forth. So if you buy your local or your honey as local as possible,
It,
because the bees are taking the nectar from the local
mhm.
plants, which are better for you.
Yeah,
So
it
yeah,
should, in theory, it should help with allergies.
yeah,
So,
interesting. I didn't
yeah.
realize that with cheese, but there again, I
Well, it's
think
the
you're.
same concept. I mean, like, I tap, one of my hobbies is I'll tap maple trees, and I'll
Mhm.
just drink the sap because it comes off like water. And I swear it helps me out with seasonal stuff.
See, and I usually during the winter like drinking basically hot water with honey.
Yeah,
And that's why we try to source our honey local as possible. Helps with the dry throats that I always get during the winter when the air is dry.
yeah,
And yeah, I think it makes a difference, and it's way better than the off the shelf processed honey that you buy.
yeah.
It's much better. But there again, you were wrong in a way because you said there's only so many sources where you can buy bottled milk. There's
Hmm.
one south of Sauk Center,
What was
that
that, Stony Creek?
Stony Creek Dairy.
Yep, yep, I know them. So that's Melrose.
Right, so
But,
Stony Creek will even do institutional sized milk.
oh, will they?
Yeah, but
Okay.
now to get the contract away from, you know,
From the big companies like
right.
Kemp's,
So it's harder for them to do that. Cheese. Great.
Kraft.
Well, Kraft is huge, but at the same time, Redhead Creamery,
Okay,
which is south of Padua, they make cheese,
okay.
specialty cheese and stuff. And now, don't you think that if they had contracts with local schools, that they
Yeah.
would expand their
That'd be
operations?
great, but the problem is, I'm pretty sure that this regulation comes from St. Paul.
More than likely. So there again, we have to take these institutional foods when we could
Hmm.
probably build our economies out there in greater Minnesota
Yeah,
by sourcing that materials locally.
instead we'd rather squeeze them so we can fund
That's right.
big people, and I'm sure they lobby. I'm sure they got lobbyists who push for that stuff too.
Well, I think when it comes to buying the food lunch, school lunches and stuff like
Hmm.
that, it's on these, massive scales and then
Yeah,
it's distribution. So the companies that get the contracts are supplying, I don't know, hundreds of schools across the state, I'm sure.
probably across the country.
Oh, they always talk about eating healthier and more in tune with nature. Well, if you're eliminating your shipping costs from all over the place and you can source your product local, how many dairies around us would love to supply that milk
Oh,
to the
absolutely.
schools or the beef operations, the hog
Yeah.
operations? I'm sure we would probably see greenhouses set up to do
Hmm.
salads and stuff like that if it was a fair playing field for the
Yeah.
local producer.
I'm with you on this 100%. I would love to see that. It's was it one year I got a cup that said live social, drink local. It's like a beer glass, but it's like it's the same concept. Like you get stuff from local. Not only are you building your community, in your area economically, but you're also having healthier food most likely.
So go back and look at some of the small towns in our area,
Hmm.
and they used to be thriving, and now
Oh
you
yeah.
see them dying. And I'll say, like, Hewitt is a prime example. If anybody knows the little town of Hewitt, and I never understood why Hewitt had pickle days. What the heck is pickle days? I don't see anybody with pickles. At one time, they had a pickle factory in
Oh
Hewitt.
really?
Yep, I believe that's where one of the companies started
Yeah.
with pickles. So your local farms, gardens, and stuff like that would plant pickles, bring them to that factory, and that's where pickles were processed.
Huh. Then you had
So
the
that
local.
stayed locally. You had brick manufacturers in Todd
Yep.
County. You had north,
You
and
had
I
paper
think
mills all over the place up north.
used to, yeah. I was thinking in the north of my area, there were places that made concrete bricks and things like
Hmm.
that for houses. So that was locally sourced. There was blueberry um, um, processors and stuff up in the Sabika area, if I remember correctly. And I think there was a place that even rolled cigars.
I can see that.
You know, when cigars were big before the turn of the century,
Yep.
that there was a place up there, if I remember correctly, that processed tobacco because you could grow it in Minnesota legally at one time. Probably still can now,
Oh,
but
you can actually. They haven't changed that law.
okay. At one time, you were regulated on how much tobacco you could grow, and there was places that were growing tobacco, processing it. Now those were jobs that stayed local,
Yeah.
and now
They ship it all
going
off.
landfill.
And that forces me to bring up like the liquor industry because breweries and distilleries are popping up all over the state, and they're getting really popular. And I know some of the micro distilleries they have to pay a triple income tax, but still, they that's kind of irrelevant right now. But they'll use locally sourced water and grains, and they'll make a product. And it's very unique.
Well, there's that locally sourced stuff that
Yeah. The thing
I
is,
think
they're
it's a great
competing
idea.
with like Jim Beam and Jack Daniels, and those are massive, massive multi-million-dollar companies. And they got to compete with that, and regulation could squander it into there, where you have to buy your booze from Kentucky versus just going down the street.
Well, and there again, if we can keep those jobs local,
Hmm.
you know, I just see such a benefit to it. But we regulate and tax the heck out of these small businesses, and the percentage that don't make it is really high.
Yeah,
You know, we need to get out of the way and let entrepreneurs start businesses
yeah,
and grow and provide more local resources so that we're not trucking things across the country when we could be making it in our own backyard.
yeah, and that'd be great.
Buy local. There you go.
Yeah, that's the lesson for today, or the command. I don't know, not command.
Yeah, not command.
The uh,
Suggestion.
the recommendation.
There we go.
We'll figure it out. But yeah, no, it's a very interesting day one. Um, yeah, Congress is keep an eye on your local politics, keep an eye on your state politics. Write your congressman.
And, you know, I think we said this before, the last couple of ones, that caucuses are coming up
Caucuses. Yep,
February 27th. You know, this is important.
yep. Get
Become
there.
delegates.
Have a voice in your local politics, or
It's absolutely essential if you want to have say in who's going to represent you. You know, and this year we have House races that are up, Senate at the federal level. So become a delegate and make sure that when you get involved and you have say in the candidates that directly impact your lives. You
yeah,
know, it's important.
absolutely. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Drew. It's Mike. Pints of Politics. Signing off.